surviving wars only to die by paperwork, cheering for revolutions only to be erased by the very leaders they crowned. These are the top 10 most brutal political purges in history, the proscription lists. The concept of the political purge was perfected in ancient Rome by the dictator Lucius Cornelius Sulla in 82 BC. Before Sulla, political violence was chaotic and mob-driven. Sulla turned it into a government program. After winning a brutal civil war against his rival Marius, Sulla entered Rome not as a conqueror, but as an administrator of death. He posted proscription lists in the Roman Forum, literal lists of names of politicians, senators, and wealthy citizens who were declared enemies of the state. The brilliance of Sulla's cruelty was that he incentivized the public to do his dirty work. Anyone on the list was stripped of their citizenship and legal protection. Any man who killed a prescribed person and brought their severed head to Sulla would receive a massive cash reward, 12,000 denarii. Slaves who killed their prescribed masters were granted freedom. It turned Rome into a slaughterhouse where neighbors looked at neighbors to see if their name was on the board. Sons killed fathers for inheritance. Debtors killed creditors to wipe the slate clean. By the time the lists were taken down, some 9,000 of Rome's elite had been butchered, their heads piled up by the speaker's platform in the Forum. Sulla retired peacefully, proving that if you kill enough people, no one is left to seek revenge. The auspicious incident. Sulla killed individuals using assassins, but Sultan Mahmud II of the Ottoman Empire decided to delete an entire army using heavy artillery. For centuries, the Janissaries were the elite shock troops of the empire, feared by enemies and sultans alike. By 1826, however, they had become a corrupt, mafia-like state within a state, toppling any sultan who tried to modernize the military. Mahmud II spent years quietly building a new, modern army trained in the European style to replace them. When the Janissaries realized this, they overturned their soup cauldrons, a traditional sign of mutiny, and marched on the palace. But Mahmud was ready. He didn't send negotiators, he sent cannons. He trapped the Janissaries in their barracks in Istanbul and opened fire with grape shot and incendiary rounds. The wooden barracks were set ablaze, burning thousands of soldiers alive. Those who tried to escape the flames were cut down by the new army. By the end of the day, 6,000 Janissaries were dead. In the days that followed, captured survivors were executed by the thousands, their bodies thrown into the Bosphorus Strait until the water ran red. Mahmud called this the auspicious incident, a polite name for the mass slaughter of his own elite guard to secure his absolute power. The Reign of Terror. The Ottomans purged to save the monarchy, but the French revolutionaries purged to save virtue. Following the French Revolution, the Committee of Public Safety, led by Maximilien Robespierre, decided that the only way to protect the new republic was to exterminate anyone who wasn't enthusiastic enough about it. Beginning in 1793, the Reign of Terror turned paranoia into a legal system. The law of suspects allowed the government to arrest anyone based on vague criteria like insufficient civism. You didn't have to commit a crime. You just had to look like you might thinking about committing one. The guillotine became the busiest machine in Paris, claiming the heads of King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, and thousands of ordinary citizens, bakers, priests, and peasants who were accused of hoarding food or speaking out of turn. Robespierre famously declared, "Terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, inflexible." He purged his own allies, including the famous orator Danton, for suggesting they should slow down the killing. The purge eventually became so terrifying that the National Convention realized they were all next. In a final twist of irony, they turned on Robespierre, shattering his jaw with a pistol shot before dragging him to the very guillotine he had fed for a year. The Night of the Long Knives. Robespierre killed for ideology, but Adolf Hitler killed for cold, pragmatic consolidation. By 1934, Hitler was chancellor, but he still felt threatened by the SA, Sturmabteilung, the paramilitary brown shirts, who had helped him rise to power. The SA was led by Ernst Röhm, one of Hitler's oldest and closest friends. Röhm wanted to merge the SA with the regular German army, a move that terrified the military generals Hitler needed to win over. Forced to choose between his loyal street fighters and the professional army, Hitler chose the army. On the night of June 30th, 1934, Hitler launched Operation Hummingbird. SS death squads swept through Germany, dragging SA leaders out of their beds in hotels and private homes. Röhm was arrested in his hotel room and later executed in a prison cell after refusing to commit suicide. But Hitler didn't stop at the SA. He used the confusion to settle old scores, murdering critics, rival politicians like Kurt von Schleicher, and even a music critic who was mistaken for someone else. Over 3 days, hundreds were murdered. Hitler then went on radio and declared himself the supreme judge of the German people. A effectively legalizing murder as a tool of statecraft. The Great Terror. Hitler purged hundreds in a weekend, but Joseph Stalin purged millions over 2 years. The Great Purge, 1936 to 1938, was the industrialization of paranoia. Stalin became convinced that Trotskyist spies and saboteurs were everywhere. He unleashed his secret police, the NKVD, to cleanse the Communist Party, the military, and the intelligentsia. Unlike other purges that targeted specific rivals, this was a quota system. Local NKVD chiefs were given lists of how many people to arrest and execute in their districts. Many chiefs requested higher quotas to prove their loyalty. 3 massive show trials were held in Moscow, where former heroes of the Russian Revolution stood up and confessed to impossible crimes, like poisoning the food supply or plotting to kill Lenin, because they had been tortured or threatened with the death of their families. Stalin decimated his own military, executing 3 of his 5 marshals and 15 of his 16 army commanders right before World War II. The purge was so thorough that even the purgers were purged. NKVD Chief Genrikh Yagoda was executed and replaced by Nikolai Yezhov, who was later executed and replaced by Lavrenti Beria. It was a snake eating its own tail until everyone who remembered the old days was dead. The Indonesian massacres. Stalin used a bureaucracy to kill, but Suharto used the community. In 1965, a failed coup attempt in Indonesia was blamed on the Communist Party of Indonesia, PKY. General Suharto used this event to seize power and launch one of the most sudden and bloody purges of the 20th century. Unlike the secret snowy gulags of Russia, this purge happened in the tropical heat, in plain sight, and with machetes. Suharto's military whipped the public into a frenzy, encouraging religious groups, youth gangs, and ordinary villagers to hunt down Maibor communists. The definition of communist was incredibly loose. It included union members, ethnic Chinese, intellectuals, or anyone the local gangs didn't like. Neighbors killed neighbors. Rivers in East Java were reportedly clogged with so many bodies that they stopped flowing. The CIA provided radio equipment and lists of suspected communists to the Indonesian army to facilitate the slaughter. In less than a year, an estimated 500,000 to 1 million people were hacked to death or shot. It remains one of the most efficient and largely forgotten mass murders in history, a success story of Cold War political cleansing. The Cultural Revolution. Suharto killed the communists, but Mao Zedong killed the culture itself. By 1966, Mao felt his grip on the Chinese Communist Party slipping. His solution was to weaponize the youth against the establishment in a movement called the Cultural Revolution. He called on students to form Red Guards and destroy the 4 olds: old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas. This wasn't just a purge of politicians. It was a purge of society. Teachers were beaten to death by their students. Parents were denounced by their children. High-ranking party officials were dragged into public squares, forced to wear dunce caps, and subjected to struggle sessions, where they were physically abused and forced to confess to counter-revolutionary crimes for hours. Temples were smashed, books were burned, and anyone wearing bourgeois clothing like glasses or tight pants could be attacked in the street. President Liu Shaoqi, once the second most powerful man in China, was purged, beaten, and denied medicine until he died in his own filth. The country descended into absolute chaos as different factions of Red Guards fought each other with military-grade weapons. It was a purge that didn't just kill bodies, it broke the psychological backbone of a generation. But the Ba'ath Party Conference. Mao used chaos, but Saddam Hussein used chilling theatrical order. In 1979, days after seizing the presidency of Iraq, Saddam convened a televised conference of senior Ba'ath Party members. He sat calmly on stage, smoking a cigar, and announced that there had been a betrayal. A broken and tortured conspirator was brought out to, confess to a Syrian plot. Then, Saddam began to read names. As each name was called, guards grabbed the politician from his seat and dragged him out of the auditorium to be executed. The genius of Saddam's terror was the camera. He recorded the reactions of the survivors. As they realized what was happening, the remaining ministers began to scream, "Long live Saddam!" and applaud wildly, desperate to prove their loyalty. Some were crying, chanting his name in sheer terror. By the end of the session, 68 people had been removed, and 22 were executed immediately. But Saddam didn't have his guards do the shooting. He forced the surviving party members to form the firing squad. He made them complicit in the murder of their colleagues, ensuring they were bonded to him by blood and guilt. The video was distributed across Iraq as a terrifying message. No one is safe, and loyalty must be absolute. The Red Terror, Ethiopia. Saddam's purge was cold and calculated. But Mengistu Haile Mariam's purge in Ethiopia was a public bloodbath. After overthrowing Emperor Haile Selassie in 1974, the Marxist Derg regime faced opposition from rival leftist groups. In 1977, Mengistu launched the Red Terror, K. Shabir. In a famous speech in Addis Ababa, he smashed bottles filled with red liquid on the ground to represent the blood of his enemies, shouting, "Death to counter-revolutionaries." The violence that followed was medieval. Armed militias roamed the streets, executing students and suspected dissidents on sight. Bodies were left piled on street corners as a warning. Families were forbidden from burying them. Even worse, if a family wanted to reclaim the body of a loved one, the government forced them to pay for the wasted bullet used to kill them. It was a purge designed to traumatize the population into total submission. Warehouses and churches were turned into torture chambers. By the time the terror ended, tens of thousands of Ethiopians, mostly the country's brightest students and intellectuals, had been slaughtered, leaving a scar on the nation that has never fully healed. Year Zero. Other leaders purged rivals, enemies, or specific classes. Pol Pot tried to purge humanity itself. When the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia in 1975, they declared Year Zero. They wanted to create an agrarian utopia by completely erasing modern civilization. The entire population of Phnom Penh, 2 million people, was forced to march into the countryside to work in rice fields. The purge targeted anyone connected to the old world: doctors, teachers, lawyers, and engineers. But the criteria for death became increasingly insane. People were executed for speaking a foreign language, for having soft hands, implying they didn't do manual labor, or simply for wearing glasses, which implied they read. The Tuol Sleng High School was turned into the notorious S21 prison, where 14,000 people were tortured into confessing they were CIA or KGB agents before being smashed to death in the killing fields won to save bullets. Babies were smashed against trees in front of their mothers. There was no political strategy here. It was an auto-genocide. In just 4 years, the Khmer Rouge killed nearly 25% of Cambodia's population. It remains the ultimate example of political purification taken to its logical, horrific conclusion: the elimination of the people themselves. In the end, loyalty bowed to lists, comrades fell to quotas, and history learned that regimes don't always die by war, but by paranoia, silence, and the stroke of a pen.